Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Some big news today, actually a couple of days ago, but the FCC has released a public notice on broadband mapping, and it's got some requirements for service providers. So if you're an internet service provider of any kind, this is something you need to be aware of, and I'll be going through that, kind of walking through that with you here in just a minute. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News. So one of the things that we have been waiting on that we know needs to take place before any broadband funds can be released as far as the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed, was signed into law back in November. Before any of that money can actually go towards deploying broadband, we need to know where the unserved and underserved areas are. So where is there good broadband and where is there not? So we know where that money needs to be applied, how the calculations are made as to how much money each state gets. And the FCC has been working on that, and we've heard recently from the Secretary of the NTIA, or the Commerce Department, that mid-June was what she was hearing from the Chairman of FCC, Chairman Rosenworcel, and we've got kind of a better idea now of how that's all going to take place, and also as far as requirements for internet service providers. A lot of that was already set in place with the Broadband Data Act, which is, and this public notice is going to refer to that. So I am going to link to a video that I did a while back when the Broadband Data Act passed, and specifically I think when it was funded, if I remember. So back in December of last year when it was actually funded. So I'll go ahead and link to that at the end of this video so that you can then kind of look more into some of the details of that. But let's first start by just taking a look at what we have in here. And again, I'll kind of walk through this. You can see here, if you want to join in the conversation, just feel free to chat on the YouTube chat function there. If you're joining me live, you can ask a question or comment there. So that'll appear here. And if I go away from this screen, I'll bring it back if I get any comments or questions. So you can see here, this is a public notice back from February 22nd. Broadband Data Task Force and Office of Economics and Analytics announced inaugural broadband data collection filing date. So this is all to get these maps in place and accurate for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we are expecting to get funds from in hopefully early 2023 as far as being granted to states and other entities. Broadband availability data as of June 30th, 2022 are due no later than September 1st, 2022. So there you've got your filing dates between June 30th and September 1st. So you see there the date of June. Again, the Secretary of Commerce said it was sounding like June, so it looks like it's going to be the very end of June when the filing period will start. But that goes on through September 1st, and then there's a lot that's going to take place. So there's still a lot that has to happen. The first step to ensuring everyone, everywhere, has access to broadband is to develop accurate information about where broadband service is and is not available across this country. To this end, consistent with the detailed requirements in the Broadband Deployment Accuracy and Technological Availability Act, or the Data Act, I love that acronym, the FCC has designed and is developing the broadband data collection, a complex set of interrelated systems and processes to collect, validate, and publish complete, granular, and reliable data on broadband availability. So what they're trying to do is overcome the deficiencies we have now in the data that's collected, which is collected through the FCC Form 477 that service providers have to submit biannually, I believe it is. I think we'll see that here in a minute. And that data is not accurate because if just a single customer is served by a particular speed in a census block, then that whole block is considered served. So you see here granular and reliable. So they're trying to get down to the address of every serviceable address. And that's important as well, a serviceable address. So every address that should be able to get broadband, they want to make sure that they can tell yes, it has it, or no, it doesn't, and then other facts about that as well. As discussed below, we await our decision in the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric protest. So there's a protest that has, they complain a little bit here that this has delayed things, but we'll hear about that here in a second. So the task force and OEA continue to make progress and can now announce the date the BDC system will begin to accept broadband availability data, filed pursuant to the Commission's new BDC rules and procedures. Specifically, All facilities-based providers of fixed mobile broadband internet access service can begin to submit broadband availability data under the new rules and procedures for the BDC beginning on June 30th, 2022. So basically, if you're a broadband provider providing any kind of broadband, your facilities-based, so that would mean that you have the equipment in place, that you are providing broadband service, then this is going to be a requirement for you. You're going to have to report all of this broadband data through the system. Filers must submit data depicting deployment as of June 30th, 2022, and must submit the data by September 1st, 2022. So that's your filing period. And don't panic yet, because there's more information and training and assistance coming, but you need to be aware that this data is looming out there. And they're trying to get this information out early. They're getting it out early for a couple of different reasons that they mention here, but a reason they don't mention, I think, is that so many people have been asking about these maps. When both the Secretary and Assistant Secretary of the Commerce Department were before Congress, both the Senate and the House, they were all asked by maybe most of the senators, or it was mentioned by most of the senators, we have lousy maps, when are we going to get our maps? We need the maps before we can do this. So, all the NTIA or the Commerce Department could do would refer back to the FCC and say, well, we've talked to the FCC, but that's not in their purview. So the FCC, I think, is coming out and saying, okay, here are the dates. The Broadband Data Act overhauled the Commission's methods for collecting broadband availability data and required the Commission to adopt new rules for the biannual collection and dissemination of granular data relating to the availability and quality of service with respect to terrestrial fixed wireless, satellite, and mobile broadband internet service, or internet access service. So it's interesting that satellite's in there. I think I knew that already, but so satellite will be counted as far as that. Whether or not that will take a area off the map, we don't know yet. And to develop new data systems and processes to implement them. Under the Act, the Commission must also establish the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric, defined as a common data set of all locations in the U.S. where fixed broadband internet access service can be installed as determined by the Commission, which must serve as the foundation upon which all data relating to the availability of fixed broadband internet access service shall be reported and overlaid. So this fabric is basically the data of where broadband can be installed. It's kind of like I guess it's the structure that this map is going to sit on top of, and it needs to determine all of the areas in the country, really down to a very small location, as to where broadband can be installed. And hopefully this will get us out of the issue of having, in the current maps, for example, having an airport parking lot being an area that was considered unserved. So you had somebody like SpaceX saying, oh, here's a little area we can cover. So they're trying to get to the places where actually you can install broadband, let's say, for a consumer or business. The Act requires the Commission to establish processes to verify the accuracy of the data submitted by broadband service providers, collect verified availability data from other federal agencies, state, local, and tribal government entities, and third parties, and facilitate a user-friendly challenge process through which consumers, state, local, and tribal government entities, and other entities or individuals may submit coverage data to the Commission. So this is not going to be just a map where data is submitted by the service providers. There'll be a challenge process. Consumers will be able to go into there and look up their address, and they'll be able to report what they're getting. They'll be able to click on a speed test, and that will submit data. They'll be able to challenge it. If they see on the map it says, hey, this address is served by at least 100 megabits per second down by 20 megabits per second up, and they know for a fact that's not the case, or they're just not able to get that kind of service, they can challenge that. And service providers can make challenges if they see that an area is saying that it's not served, and they know for a fact that they are providing that level of service there, they could challenge that as well. The Act also specifically requires that the Commission establish a process through which a provider that has fewer than 100,000 active broadband internet access service connections may request and receive assistance from the Commission with respect to Geographic Information System, or GIS, data processing necessary to comply with the requirements of the BDC. So that's going to take in a lot of independent ISPs there if it's fewer than 100,000. So that's good news that they can get maybe a little higher level of support in that. The Commission established that the fabric will consist of a single nationwide fabric that will contain geocoded locations for all locations where a broadband connection can be installed. Again, it's where connection can be installed, not the middle of a parking lot. established the biannual collection schedule for the BDC, adopted rules for the procedures through which the Commission will verify the accuracy and reliability of availability data submitted by providers, adopted the requirement that it is unlawful to willfully and knowingly or recklessly submit information or data that is materially inaccurate or incomplete with respect to the availability of the quality of broadband internet access service, and established the broadband map and a biannual schedule for updating the map in line with the biannual data collection. So some of the requirements there. Importantly, the Commission defined which entities would be considered a provider for purposes of the BDC, requiring all facilities-based providers or fixed mobile broadband internet access service, i.e. any provider supplying mass market broadband services, that they would be required to file availability data in the biannual collection. Although the Commission adopted its rules for administering the detailed and interrelated requirements of the Broadband Data Act, it was unable to undertake the critical procurement necessary to implement the various systems and processes laid out in the Broadband Data Act until funds were appropriated for that purpose. And it notes here it was not until January 2021 that the Commission received funding to initiate the procurements as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, enacted on December 27, 2020. So originally in March of 2020, the Broadband Data Act passed. And in that act, I believe it didn't provide any funding. In fact, it said the only source of funding that the FCC has, which is the Universal Service Fund through USAC, that's the fee that's on your phone bill. That's really the only place that they could get funding from. So even though they were required in this Broadband Data Act to create these maps, they didn't have any funding. So in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and of course they kept telling people that, they kept telling Congress that. So in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, Congress did allocate money to get this mapping done. Forming the foundation that will underpin all of the maps published by the Commission, the fabric will be a data set of all broadband serviceable locations in the United States, enabling location-by-location reporting and maps of fixed broadband service availability, thereby allowing anyone to determine whether broadband service is or is not available in a particular home or small business location. So you've got the fabric of everywhere that can get broadband, and then on top of that, in the mapping system, you'll have overlaid whether there is broadband there or not. And that would be per the definition of broadband. And I'm sure it's going to, right now, I don't think they have not officially changed the definition of broadband. To my knowledge, it's 25 by 3. It's been that way for several years, although all of the new funding programs are trying to shoot for, for example, the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill that's got the Broadband Equity and Deployment Act in there and the other broadband programs. So that's defining underserved as 100 by 20 and then unserved as 25 by 3. So they're really trying to push that up to 100 by 20. And they're also saying that if you're going to get the money from that particular, if you're going to get a grant from that, you have to commit to at least 100 by 100. So you have to have 100 symmetrical in that. So they're trying to raise the expectation of what broadband is, although the definition is still 25 by 3. The Commission is in the process of acquiring resources to supplement the efforts of staff to provide technical assistance to filers and others as required by the Broadband Data Act. As to broadband service providers and other relevant entities, the Commission has distinguished 4 tiers of technical assistance that it will offer as part of the BDC, consisting of self-help resources such as user guides and templates, support services to resolve basic questions on the broadband availability data collection, the challenge process and crowdsourcing efforts, and other common help desk tasks. Technically advanced guidance, including support for GIS data creation, manipulation, and analysis, and responses to policy-related questions. So we'll have to see all of the details on that, especially if you're a smaller service provider. You're probably thinking, well, how am I going to do this? What's it all going to be like? It sounds like there will be a lot of information forthcoming on that. On January 27, 2022, the Commission awarded a contract to a vendor with GIS expertise to provide certain of these technical support services for the BDC and is in the process of procuring services to provide more general help desk support. So they're procuring outside help to help do this training or provide this documentation. Commission staff have engaged in a number of other efforts to improve broadband availability data and prepare stakeholders for the new data collection. The Commission has also engaged consumers directly, establishing a new public portal for consumers to share their broadband experiences to help inform the work of the task force. As of January 31st, 2022, the Commission has received over 13,500 broadband experience submissions from consumers since opening this portal. Additionally, the Commission is encouraging consumers to download the FCC Speed Test app, which currently collects mobile speed test data as part of the FCC's Measuring Broadband America program and will be updated in the coming months to allow consumers to submit data in support of challenges to the mobile broadband availability maps as part of the BDC collection or BDC platform. So that's one of the ways that consumers will challenge the broadband at their home is they will go to the speed test and say, well, here's what I'm getting. You can see, so it's kind of a way to document that. I don't know how they're going to take into account things like Wi-Fi. So I don't know if they'll say, maybe there'll be some kind of instruction in there, requirement that if you're going to do this broadband test, you need to be connected directly to your router, not through a Wi-Fi connection. Because I'll know that if you go take your laptop outside, sit on the deck, and you try to do a speed test, especially if there's some congestion on your home network, or maybe the further away you get from your access point, obviously the worse it's going to be. That could certainly impact what your speed test looks like. The efforts have resulted in substantial progress toward the launch of the BDC, but several challenges remain. Most notably, our ability to open the initial BDC filing window as planned is linked to the completion of the fabric, which under the Broadband Data Act forms the foundation upon which all fixed broadband availability data is reported and overlaid. Protests of the fabric, while part of the competitive bid process required in the Broadband Data Act, have impeded both our ability to move forward with obtaining the fabric data in advance of launching the BDC and with making the data available to filers. So basically there was a challenge, or not a challenge, how do they call it here, a protest. So they awarded the contract to make this fabric, but there was a protest on that, on the bidding process, and that just as part of that government process has to be looked at and resolved before they could move forward with that. So the Commission awarded a contract for fabric development on November 9th. Subsequently, an unsuccessful offeror, so somebody who bid, also bid, filed a protest award or a post-award protest with GAO, Government Accountability Office, is permitted under the FAR, forget what that is, and since filed several supplemental protests. We were required to suspend performance of the contract until GAO issues a decision, and the Commission has therefore been unable to commence work with the contractor on development of the fabric. However, pursuant to its regulations, GAO is expected to issue a decision on the protest within 100 days after being filed. So there is a clock on that protest, and the GAO will issue that. And they say here, assuming a favorable result from GAO, which favorable I'm assuming means the provider you've selected you can move ahead with. We anticipate the contractor will deliver to the Commission a preliminary version of the fabric that we would plan to share with filers so they can begin developing their processes to align their address or location data with the fabric well in advance of the opening of the reporting window, which would be prior to this end of June date, June 30th. At the same time, the fabric is under development. We will finalize construction and testing of the broadband data collection system, user acceptance testing, independent verification and validation, remediation of any issues that are identified. The system components must also undergo a comprehensive security review to receive an authorization to operate. Completion of each of these additional tasks is a prerequisite for opening the initial BDC filing window. So all of this is supposed to take place before this June 30th date. So you would think, is that really going to happen? But they're saying it might even happen earlier, so I guess they're confident on that. Finally, Commission staff will be working with our technical assistance vendors to onboard and train their staff on the details of the BDC requirements and processes and how the BDC system works, to prepare self-help materials and other resources, to stand up the Customer Support Center for providing user assistance, and to allocate resources for support requests, including potential surge support during high-demand periods such as the initial filing window, when we expect a large number of filers to have questions about preparing their data based upon the BDC requirements and parameters. So certainly you could expect that as soon as they open this up and that filing window opens, that they're going to get a bunch of people asking questions. So they're going to have a surge of support there. All of these resources need to be in place before we open the initial BDC filing window as required under the Broadband Data Act. So all of that needs to be in place before that June 30th date. Discussion here, notice of the initial BDC filing date. So again, just kind of going over the same stuff here. So fixed and mobile broadband service providers must prepare their initial data submissions, reporting data as of June 30th, must submit their data no later than September 1st. Other federal agencies, as well as state, local, and tribal entities and third parties wishing to submit verified availability data, must also submit their data as of that date. It says here in the second order and third further notice, the Commission directed OEA to issue a public notice announcing the initial BDC filing deadline at least 6 months prior to that date. So the FCC had put in a 6-month notice. They make a comment here that they say, first, we want to give as much advance notice as possible to broadband service providers and filers of verified availability data prior to the reporting date and the opening of the filing window. Broadband service providers have had ample time since the enactment of the Broadband Data Act, which specified many of the data collection requirements and adoption of the BDC rules, to prepare for this collection. But we believe that it would be beneficial to provide reporting entities, in other words, covered broadband service providers and verified availability data filers, with the maximum possible notice of the starting date. So they're basically saying, because the Broadband Data Act came out so long ago, service providers should have been looking at this already. So they should already kind of have a handle on some of the things that are going to be required. Maybe not the details, but what's going to be required. Second, we maximize the notice period afforded. Service providers. Emphasize that, very important here, any request for waivers or extensions of the filing deadline will face a high hurdle, even at the starting gate, and that a failure to timely file required data in the new BDC system may lead to enforcement action and/or penalties. So they're saying here, you've had a long time to get ready for this. Not only the Broadband Data Act information, plus we're giving you 6 months to be getting ready for this, not just 60 days. Accurate and timely submission of the BDC data is mandatory for covered broadband service providers. Federal and state policymakers, in addition to the general public, have an urgent and compelling need for this data, or these data. These data? Yeah. Particularly given they are a prerequisite to the distribution of many of the broadband deployment funds made available by Congress and the IIJA. So just making a note there, highlighting that this is all required before any funds for broadband deployment can be granted in that. In addition, we urge reporting entities to upload their broadband availability data into the system well in advance of the end of the filing window. So you can start June 30th and they're saying you really should try to get all of this in there before September 1st. Don't wait until the last minute. Filers must correct any errors identified by the system prior to submitting and certifying a BDC filing, which they must do before the filing deadline. So you got to submit that, and then any errors that come back, you've got to fix that before the deadline, the September 1st deadline. A filer's failure to take into account the time required to resubmit data in response to potential rejections by these system validations on or before the close of the filing window will not constitute a circumstance beyond a filer's control that would excuse non-compliance with the deadline. So that's not an excuse. Third, we issue this public notice based on our current expectation of when the BDC system, the fabric data, a revised version of the FCC speed test app, approved third-party speed test apps, various forms of technical assistance, and other resources will be in place as part of the broader BDC framework. So they're saying we base this on the fact that we think we're going to have all this ready by June 30th. While the end result of any one of these factors could be that we are forced to extend on our own motion the filing window dates, we do not expect that to be the case. So they don't expect to go past the date of June as far as starting this. On the contrary, it's possible that all of the systems and processes comprising the BDC could be ready for launch in advance of June 30th. So again, they're saying, hey, we think we might be able to get it out earlier. The Commission retains the statutory discretion and therefore reserves the right to issue an order modifying as of and filing window dates announced in this public notice to earlier dates, subject to providing notice not later than 60 days before the deadline for submission of the data. So if it's longer than 60 days before the 1st of September, the filing deadline, they could pull that date in earlier. So just be aware of that. We intend to release detailed, well, actually, I guess what they're saying is I think what they're saying there is they could make the window, they could move the whole window. So as long as they give you notice 60 days before whatever the new filing deadline is, then maybe that's what they're saying. So instead of June 30th to December 1st, they could take that whole window and move it in closer. So just be aware of that. Bdc Data Specifications, we intend to release detailed data specifications that instruct filers on how they must prepare and format their BDC availability data. the types of data, how the system will accept the data, how files must be formatted for upload, the values that the system will accept, etc. So all of this information that right now you may have no idea of, all of this will be released later, and you'll have instructions for that. And then they talk about Form 477, which again is this filing that all service providers have to do today, twice a year, where they have to go in and they have to list, what speed is available. I think it might be the highest speed available in each census block or census block group. I can't remember all the details, but anyway, they've got to file this. They've got to do this filing, and it sounds like you're going to have to continue to do this filing along with this other filing for at least some period of time. The Commission likewise. This notice does not alter the obligation of service providers to file the semi-annual Form 477 filing. The Commission likewise did not specify a sunset date for the Form 77 broadband deployment collection for mobile service providers. Additionally, fixed and mobile broadband service providers that have traditionally filed broadband and voice subscribership data in the FCC's Form 477 filing interface will be required to file the subscribership data in both the new BDC system and the existing Form 477 filing interface. And they go on to say here, why they're doing that, but basically they're saying, they want to collect it in both areas. They're going to be very possibly going to be sunsetting the other system. They want to make sure that they have both of them going at some point, and then also it's a check and balance. So if you put something in the new system and it doesn't match what you have in the old system, then there'll be a verification process there. Forthcoming resources and additional information. Data specifications for broadband availability data, challenge and crowdsourced data, infrastructure data for challenge rebuttal, and third-party speed test data, a user guide for the BDC system, an order establishing the technical requirements for the mobile challenge, verification and crowdsourcing processes. So this is all stuff that's coming. Additional information that's coming, and that's it. So there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of question marks too. So they haven't given us obviously all of the details, but they are saying that a lot of the information that you may want to look at is already in the Broadband Data Act, because that's been out there. So they're saying that service providers already should have been kind of thinking about this and preparing how they can start to get this information with what they know now, what they know today. This provides some additional information, and most importantly, it provides those filing dates. And it also tells you need to be doing this, and that if you don't do this, or you make, you don't get it in on time, there could be penalties. There could be penalties if you put in information that's not accurate. So you just need to be aware of that. This is for all broadband service providers. So again, I will go ahead and post a link to a video I did about the Broadband Data Act when that was fully funded. I did one broadcast, but I went into pretty much detail, or a lot of detail on that. So I will post that here. So hopefully this was helpful. If so, please give me a thumbs up on this video. Click the subscribe button and click the little bell to get notified whenever I'm live. If you need help with broadband deployment services, anything from pre-deployment, feasibility studies, engineering, construction, to managed services after the fact, diagnostics, check us out at zcorum.com. We can help you with all of that stuff. And you see our email address and phone number there. So go ahead and contact us. Reach out if you need some help. We'd be happy to do it. Thanks for joining me today, and I will be back next week with Broadband Deployment News. Take care.